those of KXVS, the voice of Stockton, or its parents, affiliates, management, and staff.
Radio show.
Kimberly Warmsley.
Radio show. Radio show.
Filling the community one conversation at a time. I am Kimberly Warmsley. San Joaquin County, you are tuning in to the Live with Kimberly show. Happy Monday. I'm super excited today. I'm really excited today. The highlight of my weekend was the Imagine concert featuring Common. Even though he was late, stop hating on Common. He did a free show and it was he rocked it. There was a lot of chemistry, a lot of happiness, and just leaving that concert and seeing those young kids like really empowered was everything. So with that being said, I'm taking a little bit of what I learned on Friday and bringing it to today's show. So to the left of me, let me introduce, first of all, a man who needs no introduction because he is actually the manager of the San Joaquin County Voice of Stockton. Woohoo!
Hey.
Give it up to Governor Don
Hello.
on the microphone.
Thank you, Kimberly. Thank you for having me.
Good morning.
Love your
good
show.
morning.
Big fan.
Oh, man. I love it, too, and I appreciate
All right.
everything. And to the further left of me is another man who needs no introduction. He is the program manager for the Office of Violence and Prevention, Mr. Keiland Henderson. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning. Doing well. Glad to be here.
All right. So let's get right on into it. The information and topic is going to be real. And today we are going to be talking about strategies and solutions in our community as it relates to crime. Mm-hmm. And so before we move into that, I do want to recognize a couple things that are going on in the city. And the first one is on June 18th, 5:30 City Hall. We are going to be unveiling a proclamation to make the city of Stockton a trauma-informed care city. So we are ahead of a lot of the work that's being done in Sacramento. I know that our governor, Gavin Newsom, is also moving similar legislation in respect to the state of California. So it is good to see and know that Stockton is once again setting the tone and the bar, because Stockton, we don't follow the trends, we set the trends. So I'm super excited and wanting to give a shout out to Governor Don, because I think that allowing for this platform to be introduced to the community to actually talk about mental health has been like very empowering, because it helps with the destigmatization that mental health should not be talked about. Right. So thank you to the viewers, constantly getting people in the inbox, reaching out, wanting to know how to treat mental health and how to deal with it. So with that being said, let's talk about a treatment plan for crime.
Thank you, Kim, too. Just to add before we move on to the subject, this station really is designed, and it's really a product of people's love.
Yeah.
And the love for this community.
Absolutely.
And so, yes, we appreciate and I'm thankful that we have so many people here who are dedicated to providing this service out of love. None of us are yet getting paid. We know the community is going to support what we're doing, and we'll be able to sustain this. But thank you, because it was your initiative you saw that this is something that we needed in the community, and we want health and
Yes.
well-being to be a great part of what we do. You know, the community does not survive if it doesn't thrive if it can't survive. And so thank you for taking the initiative, and you've been doing a great thing, and this show has been having a great impact already, so thank you.
Appreciate it. And to the community, just to remember, usually I say it at the end, I'll say it at the forefront, we are a nonprofit, and we do rely on donations to the station to continue to have this platform available to the community. So if you have it in your heart to provide that outlet, please let us know. You can call the station or come down to the station. As a matter of fact, my birthday is on June 29th of this month.
Hey,
And instead of birthday wishes, hey, donate to the station.
There we go.
That would be a great birthday wish and gift for myself. So
Yeah. Well,
thank you.
All right.
All right, so let's talk about it. Crime, Stockton, strategies and solutions. Keiland, you are in the trenches every day, and you are one of the persons who commonly are called to triage situations of crime and concerns and conflict. So we know the issues. We know that there is an issue with crime. We know that there's lack of funding for probably a lot of interventions that could be helpful to youth. At this time, Stockton's coming out of bankruptcy. We're trying to, revitalize the city. I know we talked a little bit earlier, poverty plays it's central to crime. Like, what are you seeing in the community? What are you hearing? What are you sensing in terms of how to really come up with strategies to offset some of the stuff that we're experiencing as a community?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for having me. And I got to say that I'm super stoked about what's happening with you and how you are absolutely on the map to talk about everything mental health and talk about trauma that we experience in our community. So kudos to you.
Thank you so much.
And I just want to clear up one thing. I am the community engagement coordinator for Office of Violence Prevention. Just want to clear that up. I'm totally fine.
Right.
But what we're seeing, so one of the things that we really would like to push, and I would actually have to say the community is getting on board with, is recognizing that it's not just one agency's responsibility, right?
Yes.
So I'm in the trenches just being part of the work, but there are a lot of other organizations that are in the trenches as well. And I think that we look at it as being part of our life's work. But we're trying to push that to other sectors and organizations, like we've talked about before, to institutions that don't necessarily primarily work with violence prevention, but trying to let them see that it is sort of like a social responsibility. It's a community responsibility to target violence prevention. And that's what I'm seeing, that organizations that are not normally involved in that particular type of work is seeing, and actually coming and asking, what can I do to reduce the violence in our city and to increase the public safety? That goes from education institutions, from Delta College, UOP. We're building partnerships across the board, and we're excited about it.
Absolutely. I love that philosophy, especially I know that when a crime happens, there's a lot of trauma, there's a lot of triggers, there's a lot of pain. And so when that happens, it's not uncommon that people are looking for, that strategy, that organization, that individual to come to rectify the situation. But I love the concept of community involvement. What are we, when I say we, I mean everyone that's actively involved as an organization, as a leader, as a mom, as a friend, as an aunt. What can we do to center ourselves? Don, I know you had a lot of inside of that, being a father. And
yes.
You have how many adult children?
I have 5 adult children.
Wow.
I have 2, one, a 14 and a 9-year-old still at the home, at our home.
Yeah.
Yeah, we put them in the home after 5. No, So yes, and being a parent, becoming a parent is really was a great transformation for me.
Yeah.
And a lot of what we're talking about is really I'm experienced as a young person in a lot of the things that really lead to just by being socially connected, and also as a young person having to be on my own. I'm also affected and know that people who are involved in the world that we sometimes look at from the outside as the world of violence and crime, it is a different world. Mm-hmm. And it's as much a different world as somebody who, like, let's say there's a wealthy household and a poor household. It's as much as it's as big as different as somebody who's a cultural ethnic household and a domestic been here for 100 years household. There's
Right.
great differences, and the world that people live in is not the same world that you live in. Well, there's many
Yeah.
different layers to this place, and so being able to be a parent helped me to see a lot about the things that really layers upon layers that build up to what the situations are that we're dealing with. So it's really not like, and it's the reason why we have an office of violence prevention. I mean, it would be real easy if we would say, oh, we know exactly what's going on here. We could just fix it, solve this one thing and, initiate this one action. But it really is a systemic issue, and we know it's systemic because of the way we measure it. And so this is something that affects everyone, and there's no way to escape it. And we know that people sometimes really pay attention to it at the wrong side of it.
Right.
Crime is the number one issue of all voters, most voters. It's always at the top. But people don't generally think about, well, what is crime and how does it exist? When the killer bees were an issue, people weren't just like, well, avoid all bees.
Right.
People were like, well, what is it? What's going on? How do we avoid it? I don't want to get stung. And where did it come from? All that. Well, that's all great. Mm-hmm. We could find all that out. But the fact is, we have to be responsive together, and that's why the community approach is really where it's at. The oldest expression, it takes a village to raise a child. And in our modern society, we're very disconnected. Very few communities now that aren't tucked away. Do we have people that have been there for generations and neighbors who know each other? Most often in our world, the neighbors don't even talk to each other next door.
Right.
So it used to be the kids would go to the neighbor's house if you weren't home. Mm-hmm. Now no way. And so we have these different dynamics. And so as we're dealing with a changing world, those are new things, but there's all these old things that we're leaving unaddressed, and I think that's really where we're at. We know it starts in the home, but we also know that these issues are systemic.
Yep.
So, too often, it is bad when we have a situation where a child is lost and their parents are lost, and that's awful. But too often, I think we have a situation where parents do actually care. Mm-hmm. They are involved. Maybe they're not, as equipped as other parents. Maybe there's only one of them. Maybe they have an economic situation. But they are involved and they do care, and we depend on each other this way. And so really I think the issue is this broad approach where it takes many eyes, many hands, and we have to find common ground, but we also have to listen to each other's disagreements. I believe, of course, that a parent, is important. I have 7 kids, so I got this numbers thing. I got my own data points.
Right.
And I know, yes, if you love your kids, if you teach them everything that you know, and if you have to be a hypocrite as a parent, you have to teach them what you know, not what you do. They're gonna see what you do. Mm-hmm. And if you're real with your kids, then when you teach them what's right and they call you on it and say, hey, Dad, you told me this thing, but you do this, then as a parent, you got to own up and say, you know what, you're right. You're right. Thank you for calling me on that young person that I'm respecting, and then that flows both ways, and you develop this relationship, and that's ideal. But that's not what we're dealing with. We know that that's the best way to do it.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, and you said something. You said, you really shouldn't. It's not just about telling the child that you love the child and do as I say, but it's about teaching them what you know. But I think for us, that's one thing that we realize is also a challenge.
Yeah.
Because what a lot of parents know is this sort of like this generational violence behavior, right? And a lot of parents only know the gang life.
Yeah, don't be no punk.
Exactly.
Yeah,
and then not only that, don't trust the police. Don't ever talk to them.
Yeah, don't snitch.
And some families have their reasons for that.
Yeah.
So I think for us, again, it goes back to your original question, which is kind of what can we all do? What we've found is that, again, it does take a village. And so we need organizations, resources out there that can actually provide information of what a positive lifestyle really looks like.
Exactly.
Right.
And so it's going to take that mental health practitioner, and it's going to take the Head Start folks, and it's going to take the educational, of course, institution and school district to assist everyone and all of us in combating this violence.
Definitely.
When we work with a client or a potential client, we can feed them as much good and positive feedback and information as we want to, but they always have to go back home and deal with the home life, the mentality that resides in the home. And so if that mentality is a direct clash with what we're giving them and feeding them, then there has to be a support network, like a network of support that says, not just Office of Violence Prevention, but we're here to support you as well.
Right.
If you have something in the corner saying, do this, have behavior that's negative, you cannot just have another voice clashing, but many voices clashing with that negative behavior to say, you know what, this is actually the better route for you.
Exactly.
And this is the route that's not going to put you in a situation where you're dealing with lifelong detrimental consequences.
And I think that I like to always break down these terms, right? So, multiple times, Gov, you mentioned it, Keiland, you mentioned it, now I mention it again. We're talking about systems. So let's really break down what the systems are, because I think that when I'm in session, I'm really breaking it down what a system theory is, and I hate to really talk about theories. I can't stand dead guys. I swear to God. But
I love dead guys.
Especially
everything I know.
Dead guys from 100 years ago. But when we're talking about systems, I always the similarities that I use is like a car. So we have a car, and there's 4 tires, and there's an engine. I'm not a mechanic either. There's an engine, there's a battery, there's a starter, there's all these things in the car. And if one of those things in that car does not work, and the car is a system, then the car is not going anywhere.
Right.
So when we bring that same approach to families, children, youth, and we have teachers who aren't reinforcing what you just said, that positive element. You don't have the milkman, you don't have the mailman, you don't have the bus driver. No one's talking, no one's providing that inspiration, that empowerment, that guidance. Because like you said, Keiland, I say it all the time, I can't see a client for an hour and then expect that in a week that they're going to go back home and use all these strategies that I provided. Because who's reinforcing that at home?
Right.
Who's giving that encouragement? Who's giving that discipline? Who's giving that structure? And sometimes it can't always be the parent, because I know that you have smaller kids, you have older kids, I have older kids too. Sometimes as parents, when we talk to our kids, it's like that Charlie Brown teacher, womp, 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 like no one's listening. And sometimes that child may go to school and the teacher may say the very same thing that the parent says, and then the child might go, that's what my mama just said, or that's what my daddy just said.
There you go, confirmation.
So, right. But again, it goes back to having a system of people. Like, why aren't the neighbors talking anymore? Why aren't we having, community gatherings, community building? That is essential, and at the end of the day, what is absolutely missing in this element here?
I think that, to me, that is actually the major point.
Yeah.
Okay, and this is where my passion lies, because we need an office of violence and prevention. We also need the police to be an office of violence de-escalation.
Yes.
All right. We also need the
Yes.
lawyers to be an office of violence. I want to say, not repayment. Right? Office of facilitating the healing of violence, not the facilitating the punishment of a violent person. The thing is, we ignore, and we do it all the time, and it's human nature, because we need to survive, and we need to know that we got it together, and we need to know that we're right. Mm-hmm. So what we do is we pontificate. I know you guys know me, so I'm pontificating all day long. And pontificate. I got all this knowledge. I got all this. I know I've got to figure it out, and then but turn around, and then when we might not see it in ourselves, and then we have this blind spot, and so part of the reason why we don't communicate is because there are, and we got to be honest, there's economic systems based on dividing us. If we all work together, then and if he's he's a therapist, or you're a therapist, and he's a therapist, and I'm somebody who knows who needs therapy, then we can work together and coordinate. We can help people. It doesn't matter money, doesn't matter economy, taxes. We don't care about economic growth. All that we're worried about making things better. That's how we think about it in our family. And we think about this social aspect in our family, in our group of friends. And we love our friends. And when you see your friend doing something that's hurtful to him, you're like, hey. But see, it requires that connection. And so when we allow economic interests, which is really what it's about, economic motivators to divide us, to where we don't communicate with each other, then we don't feel connected with each other, then we don't feel concerned about each other, then we don't have no reason to step in. And there's no reason for the village to raise a child. That ain't my child. In fact, that's not even my village.
And I'm not affected. It doesn't impact me.
But what we have to really make clear is that crime is not a product of like bad people that need to be punished. Crime, 99%, is a product of economic situations.
Yeah.
All right. Crime is a product of oppression. And we say hurt people hurt. I've been hurt. I've hurt. Okay. And so what we know is that this is the cause and effect. What we have to do is like look at it like, hey, I'm part of that too.
Right.
Like with the Me Too movement, I don't want people to do negative things, speak negatively and disparage women and things like that. But I know how I've been raised in my life. I know the things that gone on in the world I've seen. I know the behavior I've exhibited. So like, I got to join in and also be part of being a part of the problem though.
But I think being accountable is the big thing here.
Exactly.
Because I don't think we can discount or discredit the individual responsibility.
But just to finish the point, the accountability is important, and we know about that. But there's this other thing, like when somebody is dealing with alcohol abuse, and then we call somebody drug abuse, we say they're a survivor. This is someone who battled it. But when somebody deal with crime or poverty, we say, oh no, that's not a survivor. These people who are stealing to live, they're actually survivors. And we don't look at them as survivors. We don't look at them and say, hey, they're stealing to live, but they're survivors. So why don't we figure out a different way for them to get their food? Instead of saying, they're just bad, because that's what bad people do. And so I think when we look at somebody who is suffering, and we look at them like we would look at a family member, then at the very least, we got family members that don't listen too, but we still care about them.
Sure.
And so this is how we have to start looking at our community. And that's why I think what you're doing here is so powerful. And also what you're doing too is because this is like different components that really have, that are all necessary. And you can't do it alone. You can't do it alone. We can't
Car's
do it alone.
not gonna move.
We've got to believe in each other, and we got to invest in it. And
So part of the work that we do when we actually begin working with an individual who has led a lifestyle of violence is sitting down with them. And first of all, assessing their needs and making sure that there is no imminent threat of harm or danger, because that's the number one priority, right? But the next thing is to determine what critical needs they have.
Yes.
And so you're right. There's a plethora of things that go lacking, including housing and education, low education levels, and also, I mean, just not having the ability to eat. So we look at, like, I agree, crime, and first of all, we categorize certain crime, which is not cool. Because if you,
this crime's okay,
right? And so that's not
Right.
cool. But what we look at is, we looked at the trend of individuals who have robbed someone or picked up a pistol for this reason and that reason. And a lot of times it is because they cannot feed their families. They can't feed their families because they're not working. And so what we do from society is say, well, it's simple, just get a job. But it's a lot more difficult than that, because if they've never had a job, and they've never had a job,
soft skills,
they don't know how to get a job,
Right.
and it goes on and on and on. And so what we try to do is sit down and assess that to find out what we can help them with, right away. But the other thing is, we go into this life plan, right, where we have short-term and long-term goals.
Yes.
Where we actually talk about that word, being accountable, being accountable to one's decisions.
Right.
Because once you recognize what the problem is, or where the problem may have derived from, the next step would be not to continue
Yes.
Right.
making that wrong decision, right? And which is where I was coming from when I talked about individual accountability and individual responsibility. It's that you have to look at yourself in the mirror and recognize that although these many factors may have contributed to you getting to this point,
Right.
ultimately you make the decision,
Right.
And so that's what we want to help our clients and individuals we work with see.
Right.
But that's also something that we hope that the society sees as well, that it is about individual accountability, but it also is about providing resources and services for that individual to benefit from.
Exactly.
Right? Because you have to move past saying that I got cancer because I ate wrong or I had unhealthy habits. Okay, you have diagnosed, hopefully with the professional, the problem. Right? But then where do you go from here?
Exactly.
Let's talk about healing. And that's
What's the
why I like
treatment
your
plan?
show.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Well,
much, because you talk about the healing.
Yeah. And what's the treatment plan?
What's the treatment plan?
So
treatment
we've
plan?
identified the issue. Now let's talk about the goals and strategies to help you overcome.
There you go.
But I want to back up for a second, because it just resonates with me. So when we're talking about that individual that, because we have our hierarchy of needs, food, shelter, sense of belonging, protection, what happens when those things aren't being met.
Right.
That could cause someone to, make the wrong choice.
Right.
But what happens when the system continues to be punitive, and there is no true rehabilitation?
Right.
What happens when that individual is, detained for 2-3 years, gets no type of training, no type of understanding of a transition from, serving 2-3 years, being in the community, transition fully back in the community, and are looking for jobs but can't find them because they are continually being labeled about some bad choices that
Unhireable.
they made. Right. And
Like they're unelectable.
unelectable, unhireable.
Right.
And sometimes I always talk about, hey, why aren't we providing the treatment to the person who has committed the crime? Because in that sense, they are traumatized.
Oh, yeah.
And we don't talk about that.
Yeah.
We don't talk about how they are dealing with their mental health. So you got this like cluster of issues that we don't heal, we don't talk about, we don't provide the service. A lot of times they're ineligible for housing programs. So what do they do?
Right.
And then when you call, because I've done social work for over 10 years. I know the game. I know that, especially when they have that record, they can't even vote.
No, you got to do something independent. You got to be an entrepreneur, work for someone you know.
Because you're not going to get that job.
Yeah, right.
So when we're talking, we're trying to, reestablish that accountability and hold them accountable for what they've done. And they've held themselves accountable. But what happens when society doesn't let go?
Right.
Because that's on their record for the rest of their lives. So
Exactly.
what happens to these people?
Right.
I think that really contributes to that conversation, because then they feel hopeless.
Well, I think that, and this is probably actually he's probably Keiland's going to answer the
Ke-
question
Keelan
for
got
real.
the-
But let me throw
Keelan got the answer.
my opinion is on that issue is that this is where we got to kind of reframe how we look at the situation. You talked about two different things. One is what happened to people already formed, and the other is how are we forming people. So the people who are already formed, we have to, deal with their healing and try to, improve their situation. But also they're also, we're damaged goods in some levels. So there's other things that you're just kind of set there, and we got to address issues. So if you've got a wound, and it's always going to be there. But I mean the scar. But the other thing is the new thing. So we also have to have enough foresight to realize that the problem is exponential the longer we go. More kids being born, we got growth, development. So we have to really be very, very proactive as far as the next generation. And really, absolutely. I think it has to do with instilling in a person their own value. The person that is out there doing things that are self-deprecating or detrimental, and to make it, they also realize that to them, that's a cost that's worth paying. I can't tell you how many young men of color who I've heard this expression. My life expectancy is 25. So I don't expect to really live past 25. Now the reality is mathematically, almost everybody lives past 25. But the mentality of a person who doesn't see past to becoming a real adult. I don't think I just became a real adult. I'm 45, okay? So, a 25-year-old young person saying that I really don't see anything, so all I got really is my ego and my pride and feeling good and enjoying myself and trying to forget how miserable the situation really is and trying to forget that I feel powerless to do anything about it. So, man, let's just go hard. And then
forget it.
Yeah.
I'm already hopeless.
Yeah. Burn it on both ends, right?
Yeah.
And
that's it.
That's where it's about. This side is about. This side actually often deals with the violence after. So it's almost like the Office of Future Violence Prevention, right? So, and this side here too, we see that we are able to identify the situation. And we really got to come together on this, and we have to see people who commit crimes as survivors, just like people who are involved with drug abuse as survivors and things like that. Yeah. Some people, just what it is. Some people, you just whatever. That. We should never make our rules based on the exceptions. We should make our rules based on the majority. And simple fact is, homelessness is an issue we should address first with housing. Crime prevention is an issue. Obviously, we first address by stopping a crime, trying to apprehend somebody. Let's pause the situation, right? So you address the immediate need. But once you house somebody that's homeless, now how are they going to stay housed? Well, once you stop somebody from committing a crime, how are we going to keep this from recurring? And that's the way we really got to look at things. It really is all about that, and you can't do that if you don't look at this person, this offender, as a valuable human being. And if you don't look at them as a valuable human being, how are they going to see themselves as such? And they've already been taught they're not valuable, and until they believe they're valuable, there would be no reason to invest in themselves from their own perspective.
Yeah, agreed.
Really, really, really well spoken on that.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. You said that. I mean, a lot of these individuals are hopeless, and I would have to agree with that. Having hope gives you a reason, right, to live. It's
motivation.
It is motivation.
It's everything.
And so
that's why we're here.
Yeah,
right.
For real. And so that's why we look to some of our other partners like faith-based and clergy members to, because I think that is an institution of hope, regardless of what the religion is, right? And so we look to key partners like that to be able to talk to high-risk individuals, high risk of being victims or perpetrators of the gun violence, to say, listen, actually your life is worth living and we want to see you live. We have direct communication that we provide every quarter, where we actually have this conversation with individuals who are at the high risk of being a victim or a perpetrator, to say that we care about your life and we want to see you change. I think also one of the ways that the Office of Violence Prevention sort of tries to change sort of like this continual path of, always sort of like chasing, the incident or the crime, is by trying to increase the capacity of these, nonprofits and these community-based organizations around town. We can't do it all. We're not even direct service providers, right? I mean, our peacekeepers, our outreach workers work with clientele based off of the relationship alone, and we only have 8.
Right.
For the whole city.
Our office is funded for 8.
And they're booked. They're fully booked.
I mean, they're busy.
Right.
And so what I try to do is try to find ways to increase the capacity of organizations to do more of the great work that they're already doing. And so we look for funding opportunities. We look for training opportunities. As a matter of fact, on June 25th, David Muhammad from the National Institute for Criminal Justice Reform is coming out. It's going to be at the Waterfront Hotel from 9 to 11, and he's going to be talking about youth incarceration. He's going to be talking about juvenile justice and supportive funding for organizations that are looking to come against systemic issues and challenges. That's what we can do. And the other thing I would say is that we've been involved with, or I should say I have been involved with, implicit bias trainings.
Good.
And so we partner with the Stockton Police Department, where we go in and provide these workshops where we talk about, the propensity of teachers to, just push the student out because he or she is communicating in a way that they're not familiar with, right? Because to them, when they raise their voice, they're being threatening and they're being aggressive. Now, I will tell you, being the oldest of 8 siblings, we all spoke loudly at all times.
If you want to be heard.
If you want to be heard, it's competition, man. And so that was just the nature of our household. Didn't mean I was aggressive.
Plus culturally.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying?
And so we try to provide trainings. We try to bring people in who can bring awareness to these issues that are going on, in addition to the intervention that we provide every day.
Excellent.
Absolutely.
Excellent.
And I think that at the end of the day, so I did this blog about effective parenting strategies, 10 tips. And I put like asterisks on the first one because I said effective communication is everything. Like, to have a conversation and to actually verbalize and externalize how you feel is everything. And I think that we don't have a lot of these conversations, because even now, I think that some of it is very obvious, but people are really afraid to have conversations because it's so much easier to say, it's your fault. No, it's your fault. It's your fault. Because then we're deflecting and nothing gets solved.
100%.
Nothing gets solved.
Right.
But to come,
We're just reacting.
and then we're just reacting.
I'm hurt. Oh, I'm gonna hurt you.
Yeah.
Now you're hurt too.
We have to be proactive
Right.
in these conversations. And another thing that I would say as well is that there are so many nonprofits doing the same thing. What would happen if 5 of the 10 doing, job development come together and share resources and assets?
That'd be amazing.
What would happen?
Yeah, learning. Key learning.
This weekend, I went to Canvas, and I'm not a nonprofit. Like, I just am a Stocktonian that loves my city. So I went to Canvas, and I was in Sierra Vista, and it was hot too. And I was just talking about trauma, and it went from 1 lady to 2 ladies to 3 ladies to 4 and 5.
Wow.
And I was like, we're doing this the wrong way. We're asking people who may not have the resources to come to an office.
You gotta meet them there.
We have to meet people where they're at.
I agree.
And they were blown away. Here I am. And I've been rocking this shirt for the
Love
last
that
3
shirt.
days, right?
School's not prisons.
Right. So here I am. I'm rocking like some tennis shoes. And that's like, y'all know me. I don't rarely wear jeans and tennis shoes. But I've been walking so much. So it's just a relaxed day. And so I'm out there and they're like, what? You're a therapist? I'm like, yeah, I am. And I'm from the South Side. They're like, what? But it was so mesmerizing to them to see me out there on a Sunday at 101 degrees walking with information.
Wow.
And I was just disseminating cards about, my Coffee and Kimberly, talking about trauma, talking about depression, and they were fully engaged.
But it's a light bulb moment for you, because think about, like, it makes me think about something else. Cause and effect, right? So we talked about feeling like you're valuable. There's also this influence effect where we take a neighborhood that's under stress like this, and you have to ask the obvious question: well, who owns this neighborhood? Who's does this belong to?
Yeah.
And the answer is it belongs to the people who are committing crimes. And the reason why it belongs to the people who are committing crimes, because it doesn't belong to people who are residents, is because the residents are just renting. And so part of it is ownership, and not really owning it to possess it, but the mentality of ownership. When this is our neighborhood, and we think it's ours that we own, then we keep it nice. When it's in the neighborhood that we're in, but it's somebody else's, and no matter what we ever do, we'll never get any piece of it, then we throw trash on the ground, because it's a form of protest. This should be ours, but since it's never going to be ours, who cares whose it is and who cares about it?
We
right?
don't value it.
So you think about how many. Now I'm going to ask you, and Keiland, because you look at the numbers, and I know you know, but the audience needs to think about this. Areas that have high crime, the percentage of people who reside and don't own is the highest. Everywhere that has the highest crime has the least amount of ownership, least amount of, therefore, a sense of belonging, sense of responsibility, a sense of pride, and sense of accomplishment. There's no, you keep on sweeping the street and picking up the street, and you're never going to own it. Then you're a sucker. That's what it is. You just must be a fool. You're wasting your energy, man. You just try to get some money or something and just enjoy your life or whatever. Where is oh man, hey, excuse me, man. Please don't pick that up. Well, why? Well, you know what? I'll pick it up, but I'm gonna ask you, please don't litter on my property. I'm trying to care about this place. In fact, maybe come out here and meet me on Saturday, because we're going to be cleaning that property right there, and we're going to set something up. We're going to have whatever. And so we talk to each other this way only when we're invested.
Yeah.
And so if we're not invested, then the best thing to do is keep that door closed and be quiet, because the people who really own this neighborhood are going to come out and get you. So we need to own it too.
That's interesting. I don't remember. I think we were at that same conversation with one of the public health nurses or advocates said that when the community got involved and took over the park and started investing in the park, started walking in the park, started bringing their kids to the park, slowly but surely the people who weren't necessarily, should have been in the park started to
The people who are
leave.
abusing the park.
Right, because the community started taking the ownership of the park.
Right.
So it was that emotional connectiveness that empowered them to feel like that sense of ownership.
We are here, and we have to behave as if we're here. And we have to, I think part of the problem with ownership is this paperwork. Because the thing is that, to be honest, I know you work at the office. You're like invested in there. There's this connection that the energy you spend in that office, you receive reward from, and it benefits this community. We have to think about, and we have to be able to perceive these things in our actions, and we have to perceive these benefits in our actions. Otherwise, we can't make this progress, and everything else is a finger in the hole. It's a Band-Aid, on a bleeding wound. And yes, you got to put, you don't want the blood to go everywhere, but really we got to stop this bleeding so that we can start to form some healing and the scar tissue and all that kind of stuff. And so I think a lot of times, and thank goodness that both of you are here, because a lot of times you guys are trauma, you're ER, you're showing up, and you're just trying to, triage.
We're triaging the
Triage. But at the same time, and just like at the hospital, when the system isn't working right, you got to do something systemic to make a difference. We can't stop this from happening, because this is necessary. But we can stop feeding this system that produces the problems.
But how
that
do
we
you
need
do
to
that, though?
And again,
Right.
so I think it's really simple. A lot of times we let things like money be in the way. So, but there's ways to write this stuff off. Somebody who's been living in this area for a long time, then they shouldn't have to really come up with the down payment. Let somebody else come up with that. They've been paying rent, so they obviously know how to pay a monthly fee. So let's help them to own this place. Just like when we gave away a whole city block to an organization that then took that block and figured out how to distribute this to people who can contribute. We're talking about reinvent South Stockton and stand and all of that, and so we have ways we can figure this out, and I don't have to really list them, because what we really just need to do is understand that is the approach that we need to take, and then let's all together start figuring those things out, because there are 2 empty properties for every homeless person.
Yeah.
So that is a systemic problem. It doesn't matter. This person doesn't have money, so this person's on the street, and these 2 properties are becoming less and less valuable.
Yeah, I think education is key.
Yes, sir.
I think awareness is key. I think there are a lot of different, like you said, methods that we can use to stop the bleeding, so to speak.
Right.
But we as a community have to be aware of what's out there.
Yes.
And find the gaps.
Right.
And be willing to step up to bridge those gaps.
Right.
When you talked about activating public spaces like parks, we talked about how when the community has that buy-in and that support and came out and actually beautified the park, and they helped with the painting, and they cleaned up, but they had that buy-in. First of all, they were more likely to use the parks, right? And so that's one thing that
now it's their park.
Well, now it's their park, but they're more apt to use the park, and so when you have individuals that may not have such positive behavior, or may not want to have that in the park, and they're typically known for maybe staying there late at night drinking and causing a ruckus or whatnot. When they see kids playing on the slides and they see parents playing with their kids, they're less likely to go and do their thing there.
Right. It's that influence.
It's influence, but again, I'm really trying to really push that ownership piece, because we have to own, really ourselves. Yeah. It's really what it is. Yeah. Even when you talk about systemic issues, listen, we'll be here all day. And so, we also talk about, or we have spoke about, the difference between reform and completely changing the system entirely. But it is going to be it's going to require the people. Yes. And it's going to require the people to say that we're going to take a stand against what's not good and what's not good for the people. And so I want us as a people to move from, again, just identifying the issue into, okay, what is our strategy going to be? Like, for example, OVP has a violence reduction strategy. We call it ceasefire. Right. And there's 4 tenets in that, and I can go into that, but I won't now. The point is, we have to have the community buy-in in order for that to work. Right. Great idea, beautiful idea. We move forward with it and it works. But we have to have that community buy-in. We have to have that grandmother on the block who everybody knows, right? We have to have her support. And we have to have the doctor at the county hospital who sees a lot of our clients go in and out, injury after injury. We have to have that educator at UOP who is not necessarily used to going down south, and his house or her house is up north, but we have to have their support as well. And then we have to have action behind it. We have to meet, we have to congregate, we have to talk and discuss, and then we have to set up a plan and a strategy and how we're going to accomplish exactly what we want to.
Absolutely.
Beautifully put.
Very well stated. Great conversation, you all. I know that it's not going to happen overnight, but I think that having these conversations and taking something away from this conversation, whether it's us at the table or the listeners, and actually implementing that. I think that it's a state of emergency, and we no longer can be complacent and place blame. It's time for action.
Right. It's never going to be done, but we can make it better.
Absolutely. Thank you all for viewing in today. Keiland, thank you very much. Gov, I appreciate you for coming down. I know your calendar is busy. We are looking forward to bringing another platform to you all next week. Tune in next week at 10. And again, Don't forget my birthday present, y'all.
Of course.
Donate to the Voice of Stockton. That is my
Yes.
birthday wish. I'm looking forward to hearing about the thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars.
That's right. TVOSJ.org right here.
There you go. All right. Y'all got it? Great. Thank you, everyone. Tuning out. We will see you next week. Have a great one. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Radio show.
Kimberly Warmsley.
Radio show. Radio show.